They say the old monastery on Mount Orinth still echoes with music, though no one has sung there for 100 years. When the wind crawls through the broken windows, it carries the sound of a choir, soft, beautiful, and wrong. Locals say those voices belong to the monks who froze to death during the Great Winter, still singing their final hymn as the world fell silent. But if you stand close enough to the chapel doors on a moonless night, you might hear them whisper your name between the verses. This is the story of the Hollow Choir.
The morning sun barely pierced the thick alpine mist as the expedition team emerged from the tree line, eyes fixed on the looming silhouette of the monastery nestled high in the mountains. Tutor Marcus Hale led the group, his lean frame bundled tightly against the biting cold. His sharp eyes scanned the ancient stone facade, its weathered walls stained by centuries of frost and neglect. The silence that surrounded the place was profound, broken only by the faintest whisper of a chant that seemed to ripple through the crisp air. "You hear that?" Elena Voss whispered, shading her eyes against the pale light. Her dark hair was tucked beneath a woolen cap, but her expressive eyes held a mix of wonder and unease. She listened as the ethereal sound wove through the empty valley, a haunting melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Jonas Reed, the group's logistics coordinator and skeptic, scowled beneath his thick beard. "Probably just the wind playing tricks," he muttered, adjusting the straps on his pack. His muscular frame radiated a tension that matched the chill in the air, his eyes wary as he surveyed the monastery's imposing gates. Marcus Engel, the seasoned mountaineer guiding the team, led the way up the crumbling stone steps. His boots echoed hollowly, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the vastness within. Behind him, Lena Moritz followed closely, her keen eyes darting to the faded inscriptions etched into the stone archways. Beside her, Sylvia Klein adjusted her instruments, the small recorder hanging from her neck, ready to capture any anomalies. The heavy wooden doors groaned as Marcus pushed them open, revealing the monastery's main hall. The temperature dropped sharply inside, the cold biting through their layers. Dust motes floated in the shafts of pale light that filtered through stained glass windows, casting broken patterns on the cracked stone floor. Empty pews stood like silent sentinels, their surfaces scared by time. A sudden swell of chanting rose, soft yet undeniably present. The voices were disembodied, ethereal, weaving a chorus that sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. He swallowed hard, the familiar rationality that anchored him now challenged by this inexplicable phenomenon. "No bodies," Marcus murmured, moving carefully between the rows, his eyes scanning for any sign of life or death. "If these are the monks, where are they?" Elena stepped forward, her gaze distant as she closed her eyes, attempting to attune herself to the spiritual resonance of the place. Her lips parted slightly, and she began to hum softly, trying to mimic the chant. The sound blended with the ambient chorus, a fragile thread seeking connection to the unseen. Jonas's voice cut through the moment. "This place gives me the creeps. I don't like that no one's here, but the voices are still singing. It's as if the monastery itself remembers them," Marcus replied, his voice steady but shadowed with doubt. "Or worse, something else remembers." The team spread out, exploring the adjacent chambers and corridors. Marcus led them cautiously through narrow passageways, his experience evident as he navigated loose stones and icy patches. Lena's fingers traced the worn surfaces of ancient inscriptions, her breath catching as she glimpsed cryptic symbols hinting at a dark past. Sylvia Klein set up her equipment in the main hall, eyes flicking between readings and the haunting chants. "There's something unusual about the acoustics," she noted. "The voices don't seem to originate from any physical source. It's as if the sound is embedded in the stone itself." The group reconvened in a small chapel, the air thick with a cold that felt almost unnatural. Marcus pulled out his notebook, scribbling observations even as a creeping unease settled over him. The chanting continued, a spectral lullaby that refused to fade. Night approached swiftly in the mountains, And as the team prepared their modest camp within the monastery's walls, the chants grew louder, more insistent. Marcus felt the weight of centuries pressing down, the silence between the notes pregnant with menace. Elena's expression was somber as she whispered, "This place is alive with faith and fear." Jonas shook his head, lighting a small fire. "Faith won't keep us safe here. We need answers." But the monastery offered none, only the endless echo of voices without bodies, a hollow choir that sang of vanished souls and frozen dread. And as the cold night deepened, Marcus understood that their arrival had awoken something old, something waiting patiently to be heard and feared. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faintest hint of a lament that would not be silenced. The morning sun filtered weakly through the narrow, stained glass windows of the ancient monastery, casting fragmented colors across the cold stone floor. The expedition team gathered in the great hall, their breaths visible in the frigid air, the silence punctuated only by the faintest, most elusive chanting. Dra. Marcus Hale stood near the center, notebook in hand, eyes sharp despite the creeping exhaustion etched on his face. "Listen," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the eerie murmur. She closed her eyes, tilting her head as if seeking communion with the invisible choir. The chanting seemed to swell, voices rising and falling in a haunting melody that seemed to emanate not from any single place, but from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jonah's reed shifted uneasily, his arms folded across his chest. "It's just acoustics, echoes bouncing off the stone. Maybe some kind of trick of the wind or our minds playing games. There's no such thing as ghosts, no hidden choir." His tone was sharp, laced with frustration. Marcus glanced at Jonas, a brief flicker of irritation in his eyes. "Dismiss what you will, but we're here to document, not debate. Keep an open mind." The team split to explore, moving methodically through the monastery's labyrinthine corridors. Elena lingered near a cold stone wall, her hands tracing the ancient carvings worn by centuries. "These inscriptions," she murmured, "they speak of devotion beyond death, a faith so absolute it consumed the monks entirely." Lena Moritz knelt by a fractured altar, her fingers trembling as she traced the faded script. "It's a dialect I've never seen, but parts match old rites from obscure sects. There's mention of voices, eternal singing, and a pact something forbidden." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of dread. "Dra." Sylvia Klein adjusted her equipment, headphones pressed to her ears as she recorded the chanting. "The acoustic signatures are unlike anything I've encountered. Frequencies overlap and distort, creating patterns that seem almost intentional. It's as if the building itself is a vessel for this sound." As the day wore on, the chanting grew louder, more intricate. The voices at times seemed angelic, pure and hopeful, but then they twisted into something grotesque, a dissonance that sent shivers down the spine. The team's unease deepened. Marcus scribbled notes furiously, struggling to reconcile his rational mind with the mounting supernatural evidence. Elena's eyes fluttered open suddenly as if awakened from a trance. "It's not just sound," she said softly. "It's a call, a prayer and a warning intertwined. They want us to hear, but not to come closer." Jonas scoffed, "Or it's a trap. I say we keep our guard up, not start chanting along." Despite the growing tension, the team pressed on, exploring deeper chambers where relics hinted at the monastery's sinister past. A tarnished chalice inscribed with the same cryptic symbols, fragments of manuscripts soaked in age and despair, and faded frescoes depicting monks locked in eternal song. The chanting seemed to follow them, echoing through every corridor, a spectral presence that defied logic. At one point, Marcus paused in a corridor where the walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if breathing. He shivered, the cold not entirely from the alpine chill. "Do you feel that?" Elena whispered, clutching his arm. The voices, they re-alive. Jonas grimaced, "Alive or not, this place is messing with our heads." As daylight waned, the team gathered once more in the great hall. The chanting had reached a crescendo, swirling around them in a vortex of sound, beautiful yet terrifying. Elena began to hum softly, trying to mimic the melody, her eyes distant and luminous. Marcus watched her, torn between admiration and fear. "Be careful, Elena. Don't let it consume you." She smiled faintly, a gesture both reassuring and unsettling. "I think we need to listen more closely to understand. The voices hold the truth, even if it's dreadful." Jonas shook his head, muttering curses under his breath. "Truth or madness, it's all the same if we don't survive this." The night closed in, the monastery swallowing the last light. The chanting echoed louder, a siren call that promised revelation and ruin. Marcus's pen hesitated above his notebook. The mystery deepened, and the expedition's fragile cohesion began to crack beneath the weight of the unseen choir. Outside, the wind howled through the Alps, carrying the faintest echo of a song that would not die. Inside, the expedition faced the intangible horror of faith twisted beyond reason, a melody echoing through stone, beckoning them ever deeper into the frozen heart of fear. The cold stone floor of the monastery's central chamber was stained only by dust and time. Drr. Marcus Hale knelt down, brushing his gloved hand over the rough surface, eyes scanning carefully for any indication, any sign of what had become of the monks who once filled these halls with life and devotion. Around him, the rest of the expedition moved silently, their breaths visible in the frigid air, faces tight with an unspoken unease. "Nothing," Marcus finally murmured, standing and rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "No bones, no relics, no trace of a burial. It's as if they simply vanished." Elena Voss, standing near a narrow, stained glass window that filtered pale light into the chamber, shivered slightly. Yet the chanting, it still lingers. How can voices persist without bodies? Her voice was soft, almost reverent, but edged with a tremor. Jonas Reed folded his arms, scowling. "We're chasing ghosts, that's what this is. Spectral noise in empty halls. There's a rational explanation. We just haven't found it yet." The tension between belief and skepticism was palpable. Marcus, though himself a skeptic at heart, felt the weight of the inexplicable pressing upon him more heavily with each passing moment. Meanwhile, Lena Moritz sat cross-legged in the corner of a smaller chamber, surrounded by scattered fragments of parchment and leather-bound volumes. Her eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the faded Latin and cryptic symbols with a mixture of fascination and dread. "These texts," she said quietly, "describe a ritual, one that the monks performed in secret. It speaks of a pact, a sacrifice of the body to transcend mortality." The words are fragmented, but the implication is clear. They gave up their physical forms to become something else. Elena moved closer, her gaze intense. "Is that why their voices remain? Because their souls are trapped here?" Lena nodded slowly, her fingers trembling as she turned another fragile page. In the main hall, Dra. Sylvia Klein busied herself with an array of recording devices, placing microphones strategically along the cold stone walls. Her brow furrowed as she listened back through headphones, eyes darting between readouts and the eerie, layered chanting that seemed to envelop the monastery. "The acoustics here are anomalous," she said, voice low and measured. "The chants aren't just echoes. There are distortions, harmonics that shouldn't exist in natural reverberation. It's as if the space itself is manipulating sound." Jonas rolled his eyes. "Sounds like you, re-giving the place too much credit. It's just weird echoes. People want to believe in ghosts because it's easier than facing reality." Elena's eyes flashed with quiet anger. "Not everything can be explained by logic, Jonas. You dismiss what you don't understand." Marcus stepped between them, raising a hand to quell the rising argument. "Enough, we need to focus. This place is affecting us all in different ways. We can't afford fractures now." As night fell, the chanting grew louder, weaving through the stone corridors like a living thing. Shadows danced in the flickering lantern light, and the oppressive silence between the echoes felt suffocating. Marcus sat alone in his journal, meticulously recording every detail, every unease, hoping to tether his unraveling thoughts to something concrete. Outside, the wind howled through the alpine peaks, but inside the monastery, a colder, deeper chill settled one that seeped into bones and minds alike. The vanishing monks had left behind only their voices and a mystery that threatened to consume those who dared to seek the truth. As Marcus closed his notebook for the night, a faint whisper seemed to brush his ear, not spoken, but sung a fragment of a chant that promised both salvation and doom. He shivered, not from the cold but from a growing fear that the answers they sought might be far darker than any of them had imagined. The frozen wind outside the monastery whispered against the thick stone walls, carrying with it the faintest trace of the chants that had haunted the explorers since their arrival. Inside the dim chapel, the flicker of a dying candle cast long shadows across the cold, worn stone floor. Dra. Marcus Hale stood alone, his breath visible in the chill air, eyes fixed on the altar where centuries of devotion had once been poured out. The silence was fractured only by a distant, ethereal chanting that seemed to seep from the very walls. Marcus's fingers tightened around the leather strap of his satchel, the weight of his notes and recordings feeling suddenly insignificant against the oppressive stillness. He had felt it before, the creeping sensation that rationality would fail here, but nothing prepared him for what came next. The temperature dropped sharply, a biting cold that gnawed at his skin and sank deep into his bones. And then, from the periphery of his vision, a figure emerged. Father Ambrose. The apparition was unmistakable, a wraith-like form clad in ancient monastic robes, his hollow eyes reflecting centuries of sorrow and duty. He did not speak. No words passed his lips, yet the message was clear, urgent, and ominous. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest as the ghostly abbot raised a hand in a gesture both warning and pleading before slowly dissolving into the shadows. Leaving behind a silence even heavier than before, Marcus staggered back, clutching the altar for support. His mind raced, struggling to reconcile the apparition with his skepticism. Was this a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and isolation, or something far more real? The weight of the monastery's secrets pressed down on him, threatening to crush the thin veneer of scientific detachment he clung to. Elsewhere in the monastery, Elena Voss stood at the foot of the altar. Her dark eyes closed as she softly hummed the haunting chants that seemed to flow endlessly through the corridors. The music stirred something deep within her, a spiritual resonance that both comforted and terrified. She had always been the quiet heart of the expedition, her empathy and intuition balancing Marcus's analytical mind and Jonas's blunt pragmatism. Yet now, even she felt the growing shadow cast by the Choa's spectral presence. Elena's voice wavered as she matched the melodic echoes, trying to reach out to understand. Her past losses intertwined with the monastery's mournful song, weaving a tapestry of grief and hope that left her trembling. She opened her eyes to find Marcus nearby, his face pale and drawn, haunted by the encounter he had just endured. "Did you see it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the faint chant. Marcus nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "Father Ambrose, he warned me." Before Elena could respond, the heavy footsteps of Jonas Reed aired down the stone corridor, breaking the fragile moment. Jonas's scowl deepened as he approached, arms crossed, eyes sharp and unyielding. "Warning," Jonas scoffed, voice low but edged with contempt. "More like stress-induced hallucinations. We were all on edge, Marcus. This place plays tricks on the mind." Marcus met his gaze, the tension between them palpable. "And yet you refuse to consider anything beyond your skepticism. There's something here, Jonas, something real. What ghosts? Spirits?" Jonas shook his head, frustration mounting. "We need to stay grounded, not chase shadows." The argument simmered, a clash of belief and doubt rippling through the team. The chants swelled faintly, a spectral chorus threading its way through the stone, binding the explorers in a web of unease. That night, in the sparse safety of their makeshift camp within the monastery's cloister, the team gathered, voices hushed but charged with tension. Marcus detailed his encounter, Elena spoke of her spiritual connection, and Jonas warned against surrendering to superstition. The air was thick with fear and uncertainty, the invisible presence of Father Ambrose lingering like a shadow at the edges of their consciousness. As sleep eluded them, the echoing chants wove through their dreams and waking hours alike, a chilling reminder that in this place, the line between reality and the supernatural was perilously thin. The warning had been delivered not in words, but in silence heavy with meaning, and the expedition stood at a crossroads. To ignore it would be to invite doom. To heed it might mean unraveling secrets better left buried. Outside, the wind howled through the Alps, and the hollow choir sang on, its voices both angelic and grotesque, beckoning the explorers deeper into the frozen heart of the monastery's dark mystery. The night stretched endlessly, and Marcus found himself staring once more into the shadows, wondering whether salvation lay in flight or in confronting the spectral choir that sought to claim them all. But one thing was certain: the haunting presence of Father Ambrose was no mere apparition. It was a harbinger of the horrors to come, and the expedition's fragile unity would soon be tested as never before. The echoing chants grew louder still, promising that the silence of the monastery was only the prelude to a far darker symphony. The air in the monastery's scriptorium was thick with dust and the faint metallic tang of cold stone. Flickering shadows cast by their lanterns danced across the walls lined with ancient shelves, heavy with forgotten tomes and brittle parchments. Lena Moritz knelt over a low wooden table, her gloved hands trembling slightly as she carefully unrolled a fragile manuscript, the parchment crackling softly in the oppressive stillness. "Look at this, Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant, haunting chants that wove through the corridors. Her dark eyes scanned the faded Latin script, punctuated by cryptic symbols and blots of dried ink. These texts, they speak of a binding ritual, a pact made not just of faith, but of sacrifice. Druta Marcus Hale leaned in, his sharp eyes narrowing as he traced the faded words with a careful finger. "A cult-like devotion," he murmured, the historian's analytical mind racing. They sought transcendence beyond the mortal coil. But at what cost? The faint chanting that had been their constant companion throughout the monastery shifted subtly. The once distant and ethereal voices took on a new quality, at times soaring with an almost angelic purity, then twisting abruptly into something grotesque and dissonant, like the strain of torn wings. The sound filled the chamber, pressing in on them from every angle, a sound both beautiful and monstrous. Alina Voss stood nearby, her eyes closed as she hummed softly, attempting to match the pitch and rhythm of the choir. "They're trying to communicate," she said softly, her voice barely above a breath. "This isn't just noise, it's a language, a prayer perhaps, or a warning." Across the room, Juta Sylvia Klein adjusted her recording equipment with a frown. "A language or an acoustic anomaly?" she asked skeptically. These shifts in tone could be explained by structural resonance or sound reflections. "I'm gathering data, but so far, the phenomenon is consistent with known acoustic effects." Marcus's gaze snapped to Sylvia, frustration flickering across his face. "Sylvia, this isn't just about sound. The manuscripts describe a ritual that bound the monks' souls to this place. The chanting is their eternal echo, trapped between worlds. You can't explain that with science alone." Elena's eyes opened, dark and intense. "It's faith, Marcus. The devotion that consumed them. The pact was a sacrifice of the body to preserve their voices forever. It's horrifying, but it's also a testament to their belief." Sylvia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Faith without evidence is superstition. We need to remain objective." The tension between the spiritual and the scientific widened, fracturing the fragile unity of the team. Marcus's stubborn rationality clashed with Elena's growing spiritual acceptance, while Sylvia's pragmatic skepticism challenged them both. Lena returned her attention to the manuscripts. "There's more," she said softly. "Mentions of a hollow choir collective bound in suffering and song. The monks believed their voices would outlast their flesh, but the texts hint at torment rather than salvation." A shiver ran through the room, the cold seeping deeper into their bones as the chants rose in an eerie crescendo. The voices seemed to swirl around them, a living presence that was at once alluring and repulsive. Marcus closed his notebook with a snap. We were standing on the edge of something terrible. The manuscripts confirm it. These monks were consumed by their own devotion, trapped in a limbo that defies death. And now, we were caught in the same place. Elena reached out, her hand brushing a faded symbol on the manuscript. Perhaps understanding this is the first step to freeing them, or ourselves. But as the choir's voices twisted again, oscillating between the sacred and the profane, the team could only wonder if some mysteries were better left buried in the cold silence of the mountains. The monastery seemed to hold its breath, the stone walls absorbing their fear as the chants echoed on both a hymn and a curse. "We need to keep moving," Marcus said, voice low but resolute. "The manuscripts have given us answers, but also more questions, and the choir is watching." Outside the scriptorium, the cold wind howled, carrying the hollow choir's unending song into the frozen night. As they prepared to leave, none of them noticed the faintest flicker of a shadow at the edge of the chamber, a robed figure with hollow eyes, watching silently, waiting. The monastery lay under a heavy veil of silence, broken only by the distant, haunting echo of chants that seemed to seep from the very stones themselves. Inside the cold, stone walls, the air was thin and brittle, as if the atmosphere had been steeped in frost and forgotten warm. Dra. Marcus Hale sat awake in the cramped quarters they had set up in one of the monastery's ancient chambers. His journal lay open on his lap, but his pen had frozen mid-sentence. Outside, the wind clawed at the window panes, its mournful howl mingling with the faint, disembodied singing that plagued the halls. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes and forced himself to breathe steadily. Rationality had been his anchor since the expedition began, but tonight, that anchor was slipping. The chants had invaded his dreams again, visions of monks cloaked in tattered robes, stumbling through a relentless snowstorm, their faces twisted in silent agony. He saw them reach out, desperate and lost, their voices caught in the choir that never ceased. The image faded as frost crept along the edges of his vision, chilling him to the bone. Down the hall, Elena Voss sat by the monastery's frozen fountain, its surface cracked and coated in ice. Her breath misted in the frigid air as she hummed the chants softly, her voice nearly a whisper. Around her, the frost seemed to stir, coalescing into intangible shapes that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The spirits of the lost monks, or perhaps the very essence of the choir, seemed to swirl around her, whispering secrets of faith corrupted and souls ensnared. Elena's eyes glistened with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. She had lost a sibling to similar shadows, and now the echoes of that pain entwined with the monastery's dark history. Meanwhile, John, as Reed paced the narrow stone corridor, his footsteps muffled against the cold floor. His jaw was clenched tight, muscles taut beneath his worn jacket. Skepticism had always been his shield, but even he could not escape the creeping dread that now gnawed at the edges of his mind. Suddenly, the chanting swelled into a deafening crescendo, and a vision slammed into him with brutal force. He saw a monk tearing at his own face, fingers clawing desperately as the choir's voices twisted between ecstasy and agony. Jonah staggered, gasping for air, the image seared into his mind's eye. His usual sarcasm faltered, replaced by a raw, unspoken terror. In the chapel's shadowed corner, the ghostly figure of Father Ambrose appeared without warning. His wraith-like form shimmered, a robed silhouette with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. He watched silently as the team struggled, a tragic sentinel caught between salvation and damnation. His presence was a chilling reminder of the monastery's cursed past and the terrible pact that bound the monks' souls to the endless choir. The night stretched on, each member of the expedition wrestling with their own growing fears. Marcus battled to keep his journal entries coherent, trying to document the phenomena as if that alone could stave off madness. Elena found herself drawn deeper into the spiritual currents that pulsed beneath the monastery's stones, her connection to the choir both a comfort and a curse. Jonas's cynicism cracked under the relentless assault on his senses, and tension simmered beneath every interaction. As dawn's pale light crept weakly through the frost-crusted windows, the team gathered for a somber debrief. The visions had left their marks, haunted eyes, trembling hands, and a silent acknowledgement that the monastery's grip was tightening. Frozen fear had begun to seep into their bones, chilling them beyond the physical cold. Marcus looked around at his companions, searching for the resolve that had carried them this far. "We can't let this place break us," he said, voice steady but edged with fatigue. "We need to understand what these visions mean. They're recluse fragments of the monk's story. If we piece them together, maybe we can find a way out." Elena nodded slowly. "The choir isn't just sound. It's a presence, a force that binds the souls here. We must listen not just with our ears, but with our spirits." Jonas scoffed softly, but the usual sharpness was dulled. "Listen all you want. I'm not buying into ghosts or spirits. We need facts. Science." Marcus met his gaze, unwavering. "Facts are what we'll find. But sometimes the facts aren't what we expect." The chanting resumed as they settled into uneasy silence. The visions had opened a door into the monastery's tortured past, and none could say what horrors awaited beyond. The frozen fear was no longer just a sensation, it was a living thing, creeping closer with every echoing note, ready to consume them all. And somewhere deep within the monastery's heart, the hollow choir sang on, eternal and unyielding, a frozen liturgy of faith, madness, and despair. The night was far from over, and the true descent was only beginning. The monastery's cold stone corridors seemed to hum with a life of their own as the expedition pressed deeper into the frozen silence, now shattered endlessly by the choir's haunting chant. Juta Marcus Hale sat hunched over a rickety wooden table, his pen scratching fervently against brittle paper as he tried to capture the impossible. The voices, disembodied yet omnipresent, wrapped around the ancient chapel like a spectral fog, seeping into every crevice and hollow. Each note echoed with a clarity that defied natural acoustics, spiraling through the vaulted ceilings and down the worn flagstone floors. Marcus's keen eyes flicked up from his notes, sharp and searching, trying to reconcile the rational with the impossible. "It's like the walls themselves are singing," he muttered under his breath, voice barely audible over the ethereal chorus. His fingers tightened around the pen, the familiar tools of his trade no longer enough to grasp the phenomenon unfolding around him. Rational explanations frayed at the edges as the choir's tendrils of sound invaded his thoughts, teasing at the limits of his skepticism. Not far away, Elena Voss stood by a fractured stained glass window, the pale light filtering through casting fractured colors across her face. Her eyes were closed, lips parting in a soft hum that quietly matched the choir's cadence. There was a strange serenity etched into her features, a fragile peace amidst the growing terror. The others watched uneasily, sensing something in her communion with the voices that they could not yet understand. Elena seemed to draw strength from the chant, a tether to a realm beyond the physical, yet there was an undercurrent of something darker, a flicker of unease beneath her calm. Jonas Reed's restless pacing broke the fragile stillness. His scowl deepened as the oppressive chanting gnawed at his nerves, the invisible grip tightening with every passing moment. "This is madness," he snapped, voice sharp and edged with frustration. "We're chasing ghosts and shadows. We need to focus on facts, not fairy tales." Marcus looked up, meeting Jonas's glare with a wary steadiness. "And what facts do we have, Jonas? No bodies, no source of the voices, and a sound that defies physics. This is beyond superstition." Jonas's jaw clenched, but he said no more, the tension between them a palpable thread stretching taut in the cold air. Meanwhile, Sylvia Klein was engrossed in her instruments, her glasses slipping slightly down her nose as she adjusted the recording devices scattered around the chapel. The spectral choir's acoustic signature was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The data streamed through her equipment in layers, notes folding over notes, harmonics that bent and twisted through space, creating a soundscape that was alive and breathing. Her scientific curiosity battled with a rising dread as the patterns in the recordings defied all known principles of acoustics. "It's as if the sound itself is a living entity," Sylvia whispered to Marcus when he approached, her voice tinged with awe and alarm. "These voices, they were not just echoes. There is something else entirely." Marcus nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. This Choir was no mere haunting. It was a force, ancient and unknowable, that ensnared the senses and frayed the mind. Throughout the chapel, the chanting swelled and receded like a tide, enveloping the explorers in its cold embrace. The air grew thick with a strange electricity, the line between the physical and the spectral blurring as the choir's influence seeped deeper into their souls. Elena's humming grew louder, a desperate attempt to connect, to find meaning within the endless song. Yet the others watched her with growing concern, the harmony she sought seeming to pull her further from the world they all knew. "Elena," Marcus cautioned gently one evening as the choir's voices rose to a near-deafening crescendo, "be careful. This connection, it could consume you." She opened her eyes, dark and luminous, meeting his gaze with a mixture of resolve and fear. "Sometimes," she said softly, "you have to embrace the darkness to understand the light." Her words hung heavily in the cold air as the choir's singing swelled once more, filling every corner of the ancient monastery with its haunting embrace. The expedition was no longer merely observers. They were becoming part of the choir's eternal lament, caught in the frozen grip of faith and fear. And as the night deepened, the question echoed through Marcus's mind, louder than any chant: how long before they too were lost to the choir's embrace? The monastery's cold stone walls seemed to listen, their silence pregnant with the promise of what was yet to come. The air inside the monastery had shifted. What had once been a cold, silent stone shell now pulsed with a subtle but insistent energy, as if the very walls breathed beneath the explorer's feet. "Dra." Marcus Hale stood rooted near the arched corridor, his sharp eyes scanning the shadowed end where the faint, sorrowful figure of Father Ambrose had appeared once more. This time, the apparition was different, more urgent, more sorrowful, yet still silent. The wraith-like abbot's hollow eyes seemed to pierce into Marcus's very soul, warning without words of an impending doom that no one dared name. Elena Voss hovered nearby, her dark hair falling softly over her contemplative eyes as she watched the apparition with a mixture of fear and fascination. She felt the weight of the monastery's spiritual residue pressing down on her, the echoing chants weaving through her thoughts like a spectral thread. Her fingers twitched as she hummed a hesitant, tentative note, trying to catch the tone of the choir's haunting melody. The voices seemed to respond, growing in complexity and depth, as if acknowledging her fragile connection. "Did you see that?" Marcus whispered, breaking the heavy silence. His voice was low, cautious. Jonas Reed, standing a few paces away, scoffed but couldn't hide the tension in his stance. "It's a trick of the light, hallucination, or some psychological effect. We retired, stressed, nothing more." But even as he spoke, the unease in his eyes betrayed a growing paranoia. The practical, cynical logistics coordinator, always quick-witted and sarcastic, found himself grasping at explanations that felt increasingly inadequate. The monastery's isolation gnawed at him, the oppressive silence punctuated only by the choir's disembodied voices that seemed to seep from the stones themselves. "Dra." Sylvia Klein adjusted her glasses and bent over her instruments, the small devices blinking softly with spectral readings. "There's something anomalous about the acoustic properties here," she murmured. "These relics embedded in the walls, they are not just ornamental. They're re-amplifying and distorting sound waves in ways I've never seen." Lena Moritz, poring over ancient manuscripts, glanced up. "The inscriptions suggest these artifacts were consecrated during the original pact the monks made," she said quietly. "They might be channeling the voices, binding them to this place." Marcus nodded slowly, his rational mind racing to piece together the fragments. If the relics are the source, or at least a conduit for the Koa's power, then they are more than just symbols. They're reactive agents in this supernatural phenomenon. As the group moved deeper into the monastery's shadowed halls, the atmosphere thickened. The carved relics shimmered faintly, their surfaces warping subtly as if reality itself bent around them. The cold intensified, biting through layers of clothing and seeping into bones like a living frost. The Choa's chanting rose in volume and complexity, layering angelic harmonies with grotesque overtones that sent shivers down spines. Jonas's demeanor shifted palpably. The scowl etched permanently on his face deepened into something resembling fear. He paced nervously near the chapel's threshold, his voice sharp and brittle as he argued with Marcus and Elena. "We can't just accept this supernatural nonsense," he snapped. "We need facts, evidence. This place is messing with our heads, that's all. If we don't keep control, we'll lose everything." Elena's calm voice cut through the tension. "Sometimes control is an illusion, Jonas. Faith isn't always about facts, it's about connection, spiritual, emotional. The choir sings because it remembers, because it suffers. And that's exactly why we need to be careful," Marcus added, trying to mediate. "If the choir's voices are trapped souls, bound by some dark pact, then the relics might be the key to their imprisonment and possibly to our escape." But the words felt hollow as the chanting swelled, echoing in waves that pressed against their minds. The monastery seemed alive, its architecture pulsating with a malevolent rhythm that warped perception. Shadows flickered and stretched unnaturally at the edges of vision, and the cold was no longer just temperature, it was a presence. Marcus's journal entries grew frantic in the hours that followed. Hallucinations teased the edges of reality, paranoia seeped into conversations, and the team's unity frayed. Elena's attempts at spiritual connection brought moments of clarity, but also left her vulnerable to the choir's seductive call. Jonas's skepticism cracked, his usual pragmatism replaced by restless anxiety. At one point, Father Ambrose's apparition appeared again, this time standing motionless at the foot of the grand staircase. His hollow eyes seemed to plead silently, an unspoken message of warning and regret. Marcus approached cautiously, feeling the weight of the abbot's tragic duty. "What are you trying to tell us?" he whispered. The ghostly figure's form flickered, and the chanting surged, drowning out all other sound. Marcus felt his own heartbeat quicken, a frozen fear gripping his chest as the choir's layers of sound twisted into a cacophony of beauty and horror. The monastery was no longer merely a place. It was a prison, a trap, a living choir of shadows and echoes. And the relics, they were the cords that bound this eternal song. As the explorers stood amidst the shifting stone and spectral voices, the question hung heavy. How much longer could they resist the choir's embrace before becoming part of the hollow symphony? And in the silence between the chants, the shadows whispered promises and threats alike, leaving no doubt that the past's dark secrets were far from dormant. The chill in the ancient monastery seemed to seep not only into the bones, but into the very minds of the expedition team. That morning, the brittle light of dawn struggled through the stained glass, casting fractured shards of color onto the worn stone floor. Marcus Hale sat on the cold steps of the main hall, his journal resting on his knees. His hand trembled as he scribbled down observations, but the notes no longer bore the clarity of a scholar. They echoed the creeping madness clawing at his reason. He paused, looking up as the faint chanting drifted through the halls, a spectral melody both beautiful and grotesque. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows, watching for movement that wasn't there. The silence between the notes felt oppressive, pregnant with unseen menace. The voices, he wrote, are no longer just sounds. They invade my thoughts, twisting into visions. Last night, I saw figures in the corridor, pale and robed, but when I called out, they vanished. Was it a trick of the mind or something more? Across the monastery, Elena Voss found herself drawn toward a frost-covered window. The cold glass was a barrier to the alpine chill outside, yet it might as well have been a veil between her and the world she once knew. Her breath fogged the pain as she pressed a hand against it, eyes distant. A memory stirred a face, soft and familiar. Her lost sibling, taken years ago under circumstances she barely understood, now haunted by the chants that seemed to echo both grief and hope. Her fingers traced an invisible pattern on the glass, as if trying to grasp the intangible threads tying her past to this forsaken place. The chants wove through her mind, a siren call mingled with sorrow. They suffered, she whispered, and so have I. But is this suffering a bridge to salvation, or a trap? In a nearby chamber, Jurta Sylvia Klein huddled over her equipment, the glow of her laptop casting sharp angles over her face. The recordings she had captured were unlike anything she had encountered, a haunting choir layered with complex acoustic anomalies that defied physical explanation. Patterns emerged within the sound waves, irregular pulses, dissonant undertones, and frequencies that seemed to resonate with the very stone. Sylvia frowned, adjusting the sensitivity. "There's something alive in this acoustic space," she muttered. "Something that shouldn't be." Her scientific mind wrestled with the implications, but the data was irrefutable. As the team gathered around her findings, unease rippled through their ranks. What had begun as an academic expedition was morphing into a nightmare where sound became a weapon and silence a curse. Jonas Reed, standing apart in the shadowed corridor, scowled deeply, his arms crossed tightly, his posture rigid. "This is all nonsense," he snapped, voice low and harsh. "We were letting fear and superstition poison our minds. There's a logical explanation for all this, some natural phenomenon, maybe a trick of the wind or acoustics." Marcus met his glare with a wary stare. "And yet, you vanished last night." Jonas's eyes flickered with something unreadable, but he shook his head. "I was out of it, nothing more. I'm not buying into ghost stories." Their argument sparked tension, the fragile trust between them fraying further. The walls seemed to close in, the echoing chants a relentless reminder of the monastery's grip. Each mind, once steadfast and clear, now battled shadows within. That night, Marcus wrote in his journal by the flickering light of a lantern. The monastery distorts reality, visions, whispers, and memories blend into a waking nightmare. Elena's spiritual connection deepens, but it frightens her. Sylvia's data terrifies me more than any ghost. Jonas fights to hold on to reason, but I fear he is losing. We are fracturing. Faith, reason, hope, all are slipping through our fingers like cold smoke. Outside, the hollow choir sang on, its voices threading through the stone corridors like a living thing. The expedition stood at the precipice of madness, their minds fractured and fragile, caught between the frozen fear that gripped their souls and the echoing chants that promised salvation or doom. And still, the monastery waited, silent but alive, ready to claim whatever remained of those who dared to listen. The monastery was never truly silent, but that night the voices emerged with a terrifying clarity, a crescendo of chanting that filled every corner and crevice of the ancient stone structure. Jutta Marcus Hale sat rigid in his makeshift quarters, the flickering candlelight barely holding back the shadows creeping across the walls. The choir's song was no longer distant, it was a suffocating presence, reverberating through the air and into his bones. Outside his door, footsteps echoed faintly, Jonas Reed's usual scowl replaced by a grimace of unease. Marcus had noticed the change in Jonas over the past days. The skeptic was cracking beneath the weight of the monastery's oppressive atmosphere. Now, as the chanting swelled, something in Jonas seemed drawn to it, as if the invisible voices called him closer. Elena Voss, sitting nearby with her eyes closed, hummed softly along with the ethereal chorus. Her connection to the spiritual realm had deepened in the monastery's presence, and tonight, that connection seemed almost painful. She opened her eyes, meeting Marcus's gaze with a calm tinged by dread. "It's getting worse," she whispered. "The choir, it's like it's alive." Marcus nodded, swallowing the rising knot of fear. "We need to check on Jonas." They found him standing at the end of the corridor, staring into the darkness where the chanting seemed strongest. His body was rigid, eyes glazed, unresponsive to their calls. "Jonas," no reply came. Suddenly the chanting surged, a wave of sound that pressed against their eardrums. Then, as if swallowed by the very walls, Jonas was gone. No trace, no sound of footsteps, nothing but the choir's persistent echoes. Panic erupted. Marcus and Elena split to search the labyrinthine halls. Their voices bounced futilely against the cold stone, met only by the unyielding chant. Dra. Sylvia Klein followed, her scientific instruments whirring, detecting strange acoustic anomalies that defied explanation. "This isn't natural," Sylvia muttered, eyes wide as the readings spiked inexplicably. Hours passed with no sign of Jonas. The team's hope began to unravel, replaced by a chilling realization. The choir was not just a sound, but a malevolent force consuming those it ensnared. Back in the main hall, Marcus slammed his fist against the ancient wood. "We can't just wait for it to take us all. We need a plan." Elena's voice was steady, though her eyes reflected the frozen fear within. "The choir demands a price. Jonas paid it tonight. We have to understand what binds these voices before it's too late." As silence finally descended, it was heavier than any sound. The absence of Jonas's voice was a void that screamed louder than the choir itself. The monastery had claimed another soul, and the expedition teetered on the edge of despair and madness. Outside, the Alps loomed cold and indifferent, their frostbitten peaks mirroring the frozen terror that gripped the survivors. The hollow choir's song was eternal, and now, so was the fear. But the night was far from over, and the shadows whispered that Jonas's fate was only the beginning. The team gathered in the dim light of the main chamber, their faces pale, eyes wide with shock and grief. Marcus's journal lay open on a stone altar, the ink smeared from trembling hands. "We can't stay here," he declared, voice cracking. "This place isn't just haunted. It's alive." Elena reached out, placing a steady hand on his arm. "We need to be careful. The choir feeds on fear and doubt. If we panic, it wins." Duh. Sylvia adjusted her glasses, glancing at the data streaming from her devices. The acoustic patterns suggest the voices are trapped in some kind of resonance. "We might be able to disrupt it." Marcus nodded slowly, the leader's resolve returning. "We find a way to break the cycle, or we die trying." The chanting began again, softer now, a sinister lullaby that promised both salvation and damnation. The monastery held its breath, waiting for the next note in its endless, hollow choir. And somewhere in the dark, Jonas's voice was gone but not forgotten, a vanished chord in the symphony of frozen fear. As dawn's pale light crept through the stained glass windows, the survivors faced a grim truth. The monastery was no longer just a place of study. It was a trap. And the choir was hungry. Marcus stared out at the icy peaks, the weight of leadership heavier than ever. Elena whispered a prayer, her faith tested but unbroken. Sylvia packed her instruments, determined to uncover the scientific truth behind the horror. But the question lingered: how many more would the choir claim before the expedition was silenced forever? The monastery waited, patient and eternal, its hollow choir ready to sing on. The air inside the monastery grew heavier with each passing hour, thickening like a fog that seeped not only into the lungs, but into the very marrow of the bones. Marcus Hale felt it first in his chest, a tightening that no rational explanation could allay. Around him, the ancient stone walls of the monastery seemed less inert and more alive, throbbing with a pulse that echoed in time with the haunting chants that filled the air. "You feel it too, don't you?" Elena's voice was barely above a whisper, her eyes wide and shimmering with an intensity Marcus had never seen before. She stood close to him in the dim light of the main chamber, the flickering flames from their lantern casting dancing shadows that twisted grotesquely along the carved reliefs. Marcus shook his head, a frown deepening on his face. "I hear it, yes, but the walls don't pulse. That's just your mind playing tricks." Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. "You were resisting what's right in front of you. The choir isn't just sound, it's presence, a force." He wanted to argue, to cling to the sturdy frameworks of logic and evidence that had defined his career and his life. Yet, as the chanting swelled, enveloping them in a tapestry of ethereal harmonies and dissonant cries, he found his defenses weakening. Across the hall, Drer. Sylvia Klein adjusted her recording devices with frantic urgency. Her usually composed demeanor was unraveling. "These frequencies," she muttered, eyes darting between the monitors. "They're impossible. No human voice can produce this range, this layering. It's like the sound itself is bending physics." Marcus glanced over, feeling a flicker of unease. Sylvia's skepticism had always been a bulwark for the team, but here, even her scientific tools faltered. Could it be interference? Equipment malfunction? She shook her head, her fingers trembling slightly. "No. I've tested everything. This is real." Alina stepped closer to Marcus, her gaze fixed on the relics embedded in the stone walls, ancient chalices, cracked icons, and faded tapestries that seemed to shimmer faintly in the lantern light. "This monastery is a vessel," she said softly. "The Choa's voices are trapped here, yes, but also bound to these objects. They're conduits of the pact, echoes of the souls that made it." Marcus swallowed hard. "A pact? You mean the ritual the manuscripts mentioned?" Alina nodded, eyes glistening. "The monks sacrificed their bodies to transcend mortality. Their voices became immortal, but at a terrible cost." The chanting swelled again, the voices weaving between angelic purity and guttural menace. It was as if the stones themselves sang, sometimes welcoming, sometimes threatening. Suddenly, a cold draft swept the chamber. Lantern flames flickered and dimmed, and a chill unlike any winter's breath washed over the group. From the swirling shadows stepped a figure, thin-robed, almost translucent. Father Ambrose. Marcus's breath caught. The abbot's ghostly apparition held his hollow eyes locked on Marcus's, communicating without words a desperate warning. The Choa's embrace was nearing completion. Alina stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "We have to decide what this means. To accept the Choa's reality is to accept the danger it brings." Marcus clenched his fists, the last vestiges of his skepticism battling with the undeniable evidence. There has to be a way out. There has to be a rational explanation. Just as Sylvia's voice cut through the tension. "If the Choa is manipulating sound waves and perception, maybe we can find a frequency to disrupt it." Alina shook her head. "It's not just sound, it's faith twisted into a prison." As the team argued, the Choa's voices grew louder, still, swirling around them in a dizzying dance of beauty and horror. The monastery seemed to exhale, its cold breath seeping into their very souls. Marcus looked around at the faces of his team, some terrified, some fascinated, all changed. The inescapable chorus was no longer just a mystery to be solved. It was a force that would demand everything they had, and perhaps more. "We're running out of time," Marcus said, voice tight. "Whatever this choir is, it's not just singing anymore. It's coming for us." Alina nodded, eyes reflecting both fear and something deeper, acceptance. "Then we must prepare." The haunting echoes of the choir filled the chamber, a relentless symphony of corrupted faith and frozen fear that promised no escape. And somewhere deep within the monastery's heart, the hollow choir waited. The flickering torchlight cast long, wavering shadows on the cold stone walls as the expedition team made their way down the narrow, spiraling staircase that led beneath the monastery. The air grew heavier with each step, thickening into a palpable weight that seemed to press into their lungs and slow their breathing. The faint echo of chanting swelled around them, no longer distant but enveloping, as if the very stones themselves sang the hollow hymn. "Drer." Marcus Hale led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the worn inscriptions that marred the ancient walls. "These markings," he murmured, tracing the fading lines with a gloved finger. "They're older than anything we've seen so far." Alina Voss followed closely, her gaze softened yet intense. She breathed deeply, as if trying to draw the song into her very soul. "The chant," she whispered, "it's alive here. Not just sound, but presence." Jonas Reed grunted, his usual scowl deepening. "Presence or not, it's messing with our heads. I don't like this place." Lena Moritz bent over a crumbling manuscript, her fingers trembling slightly as she deciphered the archaic script. "It speaks of a ritual," she said, voice quivering with both excitement and dread. "A binding, a sacrifice. The monks surrendered their bodies to transcendence, but it was a pact with something dark. The choir, their voices trapped between worlds." Marcus swallowed hard, the words stirring a cold fear deep within. "So they are still here," he said quietly. "Not in flesh, but in song. Prisoners of their own faith." The group entered a vast chamber carved from the living rock, the walls etched with grotesque symbols and faded frescoes depicting angelic figures twisted in agony. A stone altar stood at the center, stained dark with the passage of centuries. The chanting crescendoed into a chorus that seemed to emanate from the very air itself, surrounding them, pressing in. Elena approached the altar, her lips parting as she began to hum softly, matching the eerie melody that filled the chamber. Her eyes closed, and for a moment, the team saw a transformation, a serene acceptance flickering across her face. Marcus watched, torn between fascination and terror. "Elena, be careful," he cautioned, voice low. "This place, it's not just memories, it's a trap." Jonas shuffled uneasily, clutching his recording device. "I don't believe in curses," he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "But this is something else." Suddenly, a cold gust swept through the chamber. From the shadows near the entrance, a figure emerged, Father Ambrose. His wraith-like form glided silently forward, hollow eyes locking with Marcus's. The apparition raised a hand in a slow, deliberate motion, a gesture that spoke of warning and despair. No words escaped the ghostly lips, but the message was clear: the pact's price was eternal, and the choir's reach was inexorable. The team recoiled, the oppressive weight of the chamber pressing down on their minds and spirits. Marcus's journal lay open in his hands, but the pen trembled as he struggled to record the truth of what they had uncovered. Faith, he realized bitterly, had become their prison. As the chanting swelled once more, the line between devotion and madness blurred irrevocably. The explorers stood at the precipice, caught between the echoes of damned souls and the fragile hope of escape. The dark pact that had ensnared the monks now threatened to consume them all. A distant howl echoed through the monastery's ancient halls, a reminder that the hollow choir waited patiently, eternally singing its frozen lament. And deep below, where the shadows breathed and whispered, the choir's song grew louder still. The explorers had taken a step too far into the depths of devotion, and the price was only beginning to reveal itself. The monastery's cold was no longer merely a biting chill carried by alpine winds. It was a living, breathing entity that crept beneath the explorers' layers and settled deep within their bones. As the team stepped further into the great hall, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, and frost, a palpable shift, gripped the air. Their breaths emerged in crystalline clouds, delicate and fleeting, yet the frost that laced the ancient stone walls seemed eternal, untouched by time's usual thaw. Dra. Marcus Hale tightened his coat collar, his sharp eyes scanning the dim expanse. "It's beyond any normal cold," he muttered, his voice betraying a flicker of unease. His usual confidence felt brittle here, shattered by the hostile atmosphere and the relentless chanting that echoed from unseen corners. That chanting, elusive, disembodied, wove through the frigid air like spectral threads, sometimes soaring in angelic harmony, other times descending into grotesque contortions of sound that gnawed at the edges of sanity. Elena Voss stood silently near the frost-encrusted altar, her dark hair catching the faint, spectral light. Her eyes were closed, lips parted as she softly hummed to the choir's ethereal cadence. The faint vibration of her voice seemed to tether her to the intangible melodies, drawing her into a communion that was as terrifying as it was beautiful. Marcus watched her, torn between his ingrained skepticism and a reluctant fascination he could not name. "Elena," he called gently, stepping closer. "You feel it too, don't you? The presence." She opened her eyes slowly, the expression on her face a fragile blend of reverence and fear. "It's more than presence, Marcus. It's a call of frozen lament that binds us all. I think the choir, they want us to join their song. Jonas Reed shifted uneasily nearby, his breath ragged as he pulled his jacket tighter. The cold seemed to grip his limbs, freezing his movements in place. Enough of this spiritual nonsense, he snapped, his voice rough. We were scientists and explorers, not ghost hunters. This place is playing tricks on your mind. But even as he spoke, the choir's voices twisted into cruel laughter, echoing mockingly through the vast hall. Jonas's scowl deepened, but the paralysis in his limbs betrayed the terror clawing beneath his cynicism. He took a step forward, then another, then suddenly stumbled, the cold sapping his strength with cruel efficiency. Dra. Sylvia Klein crouched near a shattered pillar, her glasses fogged with her own breath. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted her recording devices, eyes flicking rapidly between the instruments and the swirling mists of sound. The acoustic frequencies. They were unlike anything I've ever encountered, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The choir's voices. They were distorting, warping in ways that defy physics. The others gathered around her, drawn by the dissonant symphony that played through the speakers. The choir's tones oscillated wildly from hauntingly beautiful areas that stirred an inexplicable yearning to guttural, monstrous howls that sent shivers racing down their spines. Marcus opened his notebook, hands unsteady as he scribbled observations. His rational mind fought to decode the impossible phenomena, but with each passing moment, his certainty frayed. The cold was no longer just an environmental hazard. It was a supernatural force, entwined with the choir's eternal song, freezing not only the air, but the very souls of all who dared intrude. "We can't linger here," Marcus finally said, voice low and urgent. "This place, it's alive with something ancient and malevolent. Our presence only seems to feed it." Elena's gaze lingered on the altar, where frost crystals glittered like shattered glass. "But if we flee now, what becomes of those voices? Of the souls trapped in that choir? We survive," Jonas growled, struggling to regain composure. "That's all that matters." Yet survival felt like a distant hope as the cold deepened, a tangible shroud wrapping tighter with every breath. Frozen fear settled like a stone in their chests, rooting them in place even as the choir's voices beckoned and threatened in equal measure. As night fell outside and shadows lengthened within, the monastery transformed into a living nightmare of ice and sound. The explorers found themselves caught between awe and terror, their rational defenses melting away beneath the relentless weight of the frozen choir's song, a song that promised salvation, damnation, and an eternal silence that no warmth could ever break. And in the stillness, the echo of 1,000 disembodied voices whispered secrets best left unheard, chilling the soul and binding it forever in frozen fear. The chapter closed with Marcus's hand trembling over his notebook, the final words scrawled in hurried script. "We stand on the edge of reason and oblivion. How long before the cold claims us all?" Outside, the wind howled through the Alpine Pass, a mournful accompaniment to the hollow choir's endless, frozen lament. The air in the chapel grew denser, as if the very atmosphere conspired to suffocate hope. Dra. Marcus Hale stood rigidly near the altar, his breath visible in the cold that seeped through the stone like a living thing. The chanting swelled an impossible, ethereal symphony that filled every corner, every crevice, reverberating through the frozen silence. It was no longer simply a sound, but a presence, pressing in on the explorers with tangible weight. Elena Voss stood beside him, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight that barely pierced the creeping gloom. Her lips moved softly in tune with the ghostly chant, a desperate attempt to forge a connection with the invisible choir that consumed the monastery's soul. The melody was both beautiful and grotesque, a paradox that gnawed at the edges of reason and sanity alike. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the chapel, extinguishing the candles in a sigh of darkness. Marcus's heart hammered as he sensed movement behind him. Turning sharply, he glimpsed a figure materializing out of the shadows. Father Ambrose. The apparition was wraith-like, robed in tattered ecclesiastical garments that seemed to absorb light, his hollow eyes holding an unbearable weight of sorrow and warning. Without a word, Father Ambrose extended a skeletal hand, his fingers curling in a gesture both beckoning and forbidding. Marcus's rational mind wrestled with the impossible reality before him, but the message was clear. The choir demanded them. It sought to claim their voices, their souls, to bind them forever in its hollow embrace. Elena's humming faltered, replaced by a whisper of fear that rippled through the group. "Duh." Sylvia Klein, nearby with her recording equipment, stared wide-eyed as the distorted voices warped the air around them. Her fingers trembled over the dials, attempting to capture the impossible sounds, but even science faltered here. The choir was no mere acoustic phenomenon, it was a living nightmare woven into the monastery's very bones. The temperature plummeted further, the cold biting deeper than any natural frost. Marcus clenched his jaw, the stubbornness that had carried him this far now a fragile shield against the encroaching madness. Elena's gaze met his, a silent plea passing between them, to resist, to survive, to escape the choir's clawing grasp. But the choir's song was relentless. It seeped into their thoughts, a siren's call promising transcendence or oblivion. Father Ambrose's apparition faded slowly, leaving behind a haunting silence that pressed upon their souls heavier than any sound. Trapped between spectral demand and mortal fear, the explorers faced the ultimate choice. To join the hollow choir was to lose oneself in eternal limbo, a fate worse than death. Yet to flee meant confronting the unknown horrors waiting beyond the monastery's cold walls. As the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, Marcus's voice broke the silence. "We cannot let this place claim us," he said, determination hardening his tone. "We find a way out before the choir's demand becomes our fate." Elena nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and terror. Around them, the echoes of the choir whispered still, a frozen fear that would not be silenced. The monastery held its breath, waiting. And the hollow choir continued to sing. The chill in the air had grown sharper, biting deeper into the bones of the remaining expedition members. In the crumbling chapel, where fractured beams allowed shards of pale light to scatter like broken promises across the stone floor, Marcus Hale sat hunched over his worn leather journal. His fingers trembled as they traced the inked lines of his previous entries, each one a step further into the abyss that the monastery had become. Around him, the faint, disembodied chanting echoed endlessly, weaving itself into the very fabric of the cold stone. A ceaseless hymn that pressed against his mind like an invisible vice. He closed his eyes, trying to summon the rationality that had always defined him, a historian's discipline, a seeker of truths grounded in facts and evidence. But here, within these forsaken walls, facts twisted into shadows and evidence dissolved into whispers. The voices that drifted through the corridors were no longer mere sounds. They were a presence, a living entity that clawed at the edges of sanity. Marcus's breath hitched as a sudden wave of panic surged through him, cold and relentless, and for a moment, the sturdy veneer of his skepticism cracked. "Marcus." Elena's voice was soft, tentative, yet threaded with urgency. She knelt at the chapel's altar, fingers brushing the shattered remains of a once majestic statue. Her eyes, dark pools reflecting the dim light, shimmered with unshed tears. "You must hold on. We have to hold on." He looked up, meeting her gaze, searching for the calm she seemed to embody despite the growing dread that clung to them all. Elena hummed the haunting chant, a fragile tether to something beyond the cold stone and frozen fear. Her voice, barely audible, wove through the silence, an attempt to reach the spiritual core that the monastery's darkness sought to suffocate. "Hope," she whispered, "is all we have left." But even as she spoke, the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent rhythm, the chanting rising and falling like a tide that threatened to drown their very souls. Nearby, Sylvia Klein was a stark contrast to their emotional turmoil. Surrounded by her instruments, the scientist's brow furrowed in concentration as she monitored the equipment, that recorded the monastery's acoustic phenomena. Yet the numbers and waveforms on her screens defied conventional explanation frequencies that bent and looped impossibly, sound waves that seemed to fold back upon themselves, creating an auditory labyrinth with no exit. "This can't be real," Sylvia muttered, voice tight with frustration. These readings, they shouldn't exist, not in any known physical environment. Her scientific skepticism, once a pillar of certainty, now wavered under the weight of the inexplicable. The instruments that were meant to anchor her in reason only deepened the enigma, blurring the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural. Suddenly, the faint flicker of ethereal light caught their attention. In the shadowed corridor beyond the chapel, the ghostly figure of Father Ambrose materialized, his wraith-like form robed in tattered vestments, hollow eyes seeming to bore into their souls. He neither spoke nor moved, but his presence was a profound statement, a silent testament to the tragic duty that bound him to this forsaken place. Marcus swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the apparition's gaze. It was a moment heavy with unspoken warnings, a reminder of the thin line they walk between salvation and eternal damnation. The apparition's sorrowful eyes seemed to plead with them, urging understanding yet offering no easy answers. The team's fractures widened. Marcus's journal entries became erratic, filled with frantic observations and growing despair. Elena's spiritual fortitude was tested daily, her quiet strength contending with the monastery's oppressive aura. Sylvia's scientific detachment frayed as the acoustic anomalies deepened, twisting the very air into a tangible threat. "We were losing ourselves," Marcus confessed one evening, voice hoarse, eyes haunted. "This place, it's not just the cold or the isolation, it's the choir, it's everything we don't understand." Elena reached out, placing a steady hand on his arm. "We must remember why we came here, to uncover, to understand, to survive. Our faith, whether in reason or spirit, is what will guide us through this darkness." But even as they clung to their beliefs, the monastery seemed to respond, its walls whispering secrets in the endless chant, drawing them further into the frozen abyss. Madness was no longer a distant threat, it was an imminent, creeping presence, stalking every shadow, echoing in every silence. The descent into madness was underway, and the fragile bonds of the expedition were the only barriers left against the choir's insidious embrace. The air grew heavier as the expedition team descended the narrow stone staircase. Their footsteps muffled beneath the weight of silence that seemed to press against every surface. Flickering beams from their headlamps cut through the damp darkness, revealing ancient frescoes that clung to the walls like spectral memories. The images portrayed monks engaged in strange, ritualistic postures, their faces rigid with fervor, surrounded by shadowy forms that twisted unnaturally, as if the very essence of the monastery was entwined with something beyond human comprehension. Duke Marcus Hale led the way, his breath visible in the cold air. His usual stoic demeanor was shadowed by a deepening unease. Beside him, Elena Voss moved with a reverent quiet, her eyes wide as she absorbed the spectral artistry that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Jonas Reed followed, his scowl deepening with every step, the muscles in his jaw clenched as he fought the gnawing sense of dread threatening to unravel his skepticism. Above them, the hollow choir's voices rose and fell in a melody that was at once angelic and grotesque. The sound seeped from the ancient stones, weaving a tapestry of sound that wrapped around them, echoing endlessly through the crypt. It was as if the monastery itself sang, a living entity feeding on the souls trapped within its walls. Dra. Sylvia Klein crouched near a cluster of carvings etched deep into the stone floor. Her fingers traced the grooves, eyes narrowing as she adjusted the settings on her portable analyzer. "These symbols," she murmured, "they correspond to the acoustic anomalies we've been recording. It's as if this crypt was designed to capture and amplify the chants, to bind them here forever." Marcus studied the carvings, the realization settling like a stone in his gut. "A prison of sound," he said quietly. "A choir not of the living, but of the damned." Suddenly, a chill swept through the chamber, and a spectral figure materialized in the corner. Father Ambrose, the monastery's former abbot, appeared as a wraith-like silhouette draped in tattered robes. His hollow eyes reflected centuries of sorrow, his presence a silent admonition. Elena stepped forward, her voice barely more than a whisper. "He's here to warn us. To remind us of the cost the price paid for this eternal song." Jonas shifted uneasily, unwilling to acknowledge the apparition. Yet even he could not deny the oppressive weight of the moment. From a crumbling pedestal nearby, Elena retrieved a fragile manuscript, its pages yellowed and brittle. She began to read aloud, her tone trembling. The text spoke of other monasteries across distant mountains and forgotten valleys, each bound by similar dark pacts. The choir was no isolated phenomenon, but part of a vast network of spiritual corruption that had spread like a blight through the ages. Marcus exchanged a grim glance with Elena. "This isn't just a local curse, it's a legacy of damnation that stretches beyond this place." The chamber seemed to pulse in response, the choir's voices rising in a crescendo that filled every corner with a haunting resonance. As the echoes faded, the team stood in stunned silence, the weight of the discovery pressing down like the cold stone around them. The horror they faced was no longer confined to the monastery's walls. It was a sprawling, ancient evil, woven into the very fabric of faith and devotion, twisting hope into despair. Marcus closed his journal with a decisive snap. "We need to understand what we're up against if we're to survive this core. It's more than a haunting. It's a force, and it's far from done." Elena nodded, her eyes reflecting both fear and resolve. "And if this network is real, then our escape may only be the beginning of a larger nightmare." Jonas swallowed hard, the lines of his scowl softening momentarily as the enormity of their plight became undeniable. The choir's song resumed, weaving through the crypt like a living thing, a reminder that faith, when corrupted, could become a prison from which there was no release. Outside, the cold wind howled through the broken windows, carrying the hollow choir's eternal lament into the endless night. And somewhere deep within the shadows of the Alps, the echoes of damnation continued to grow. The monastery loomed around them like a frozen tome, its ancient stones soaked in centuries of silence and shadow. The echoing chants that had haunted their every step now seemed to pulse with a life of their own, threading through the air like a suffocating breeze. Marcus stood rigid in the grand hall, the flickering lantern light casting long, quivering shadows against the stone walls. His journal lay open on a nearby pew, but his fingers were clenched tight, knuckles white. The notes he had taken felt futile now, mere scraps in a storm of incomprehensible horror. Elena moved forward with a quiet grace, her dark eyes reflecting the wavering light. She raised her voice, soft and trembling, and began to hum a melody that twisted and turned like the dissonant echoes of the choir itself. Her lips parted, shaping the ancient chants she had heard in the empty corridors, her voice waving fragile threads into the oppressive silence. Around her, the air shifted, a tangible current swirling like a cold wind that seemed to breathe and sigh with the monks' lost souls. Marcus's breath caught. The rational mind that had driven him to this cursed place faltered in the face of this spectral symphony. He paced restlessly, eyes darting to the dark corners where shadows pooled like ink. "Elena," he said, voice strained, "what are you doing? It's madness." She did not stop. "No," she whispered, "it's a connection. We can reach them." Jonas stepped forward, his muscular frame taut with frustration. "Reach them? Or get swallowed whole like the others?" His scowl deepened, voice sharp as broken glass. "We're wasting time while this place drags us down." The tension snapped like a brittle wire. Marcus turned on Jonas, eyes blazing with a desperate fire. "And what would you have us do? Run blindly into the storm? There's more at stake here than your cynicism." Jonas's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Faith won't save us. Only getting out alive will." The heated exchange echoed through the stone corridors, the voices of men clashing amid the choir's relentless song. "Dra." Sylvia Klein, standing apart with her instruments, adjusted her glasses nervously, eyes flicking between the arguing men and the ephemeral shadows that seemed to move just beyond sight. Suddenly, a chill swept through the hall. A wraith-like figure emerged from the gloom. Father Ambrose, his robed form drifting silently, hollow eyes reflecting centuries of sorrow and regret. The team froze, the air thickening with a heavy stillness. The apparition's gaze settled on each of them in turn, a silent judgment that pressed on their very souls. In that moment, Marcus's stubborn denial shattered like brittle glass. The rational world he clung to crumbled beneath the weight of this haunted place. Elena stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "Father Ambrose," she called softly, "we seek to understand. To end this suffering, tell us what must be done." The ghost's form flickered, a whisper of movement that seemed more a presence than a being. The Chor's chants swelled around them, a cacophony of beauty and terror intertwined. The choice was clear: to confront the darkness or be consumed by it. As the spectral hymn reached a crescendo, the survivors stood at the breaking point, their fates intertwined with the eternal song of the hollow choir. The night stretched on, endless and cold, as the ancient monastery waited, patient and unforgiving. But within the depths of despair, a fragile hope lingered. Could the echoes of faith, twisted though they were, still hold the key to salvation? Or would the choir claim them all, voices lost in the frozen abyss forever? The unanswered question hung in the frigid air, a haunting refrain to the horror that had become their reality. And as the last flicker of light dimmed, the great stones whispered their endless litany, a song of faith, madness, and frozen fear. The cold was no longer just a feature of the mountain air or the stone walls that enclosed them. It had become something else entirely. It seeped into their bones, a creeping frost that whispered warnings with every breath they took. The monastery had swallowed Jonas, and with him, whatever sense of safety the expedition once held had crumbled into dust. Marcus Hale stood motionless in the corridor where Jonas had last been seen, his sharp eyes scanning the emptiness that seemed to stretch into an abyss. The faint chanting, once a distant echo, now filled the halls with a maddening insistence, rising and falling like waves, crushing relentlessly against a cliff. It was no longer just sound, it was a presence, a force that clawed at the edges of his sanity. His hands trembled despite himself as he clutched his journal, the pages filled with meticulous notes that now felt woefully inadequate. "Elena," he called softly, as though his voice alone might shatter the fragile veil of silence that had settled. "We need to regroup. We can't let this place break us apart." From deeper within the monastery, Elena Voss emerged, her dark hair draped loosely over her shoulders, eyes wide but calm. She moved with a quiet grace that seemed almost otherworldly in the oppressive atmosphere. Kneeling on the icy floor, she began to hum the haunting chants that had plagued their nights and days. Her voice was soft, tentative, weaving through the endless chorus like a thread of fragile hope. Marcus watched, a mixture of awe and terror stirring within him. Elena's connection to the monastery's spectral choir was unsettling yet strangely comforting. She was reaching out to the unseen, perhaps trying to find a way to soothe the restless voices. Meanwhile, Sylvia Klein's hands moved rapidly over the controls of her recording equipment, eyes darting between the blinking lights and her notes. Her scientific skepticism was cracking under the weight of what she was witnessing. The acoustic anomalies she recorded defied explanation, patterns that warped and twisted, voices layered upon voices, some angelic, others grotesque. The data revealed a dissonance that no natural phenomenon could produce. "This isn't just sound," Sylvia muttered, her voice strained. "It's alive. It's manipulating the environment. The core isn't just a memory, it's a force." Marcus Engel, the steadfast mountaineer, moved through the shadows with practiced caution, his weather-beaten face tight with concern. He whispered urgently to Lena Moritz near a shattered window, the pale mountain light casting their elongated forms against the frost-bitten stone. "We can't stay here much longer," Marcus said, voice low but firm. "The Choa's grip is tightening. We need a plan. Now." Lena nodded, her youthful features grim. "The texts hint at hidden passages, but they don't say where exactly. We have to find them before it's too late." The oppressive silence was shattered by the Choa's relentless singing, a chilling symphony that seemed to echo from every corner and none. It was a song of devotion, madness, and eternal torment, a reminder that the monks who once inhabited this place had vanished, their bodies lost but their voices trapped in a dark pact. As the minutes stretched into hours, the atmosphere thickened with frozen fear. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision. Whispers slithered beneath the chanting, carrying promises and threats intertwined. Trust frayed among the survivors. Marcus found himself questioning Elena's increasing acceptance of the supernatural, while Jonna's absence haunted every step. The Choa's influence was no longer subtle. It invaded their dreams, twisted their thoughts, and eroded the thin veneer of reason each clung to. One by one, the members of the expedition felt the pull, the temptation to surrender to the eternal song, to become part of the hollow choir themselves. Elena's humming grew louder, her eyes reflecting a depth of sorrow and resolve that unsettled Marcus. "We have to hold on," she whispered. "There's a thread of light in the darkness. We can't let it consume us." But even as she spoke, the walls seemed to close in, the cold intensifying, and the voices swelling to a crescendo that promised oblivion. The chapter closed with the survivors huddled together, caught between despair and a flicker of hope. As the hollow choir's song echoed endlessly through the monastery's frozen halls, threatening to claim them one by one. The frigid air bit through layers of clothing as Marcus led the group deeper into the monastery's twisting corridors. Each step echoed softly, swallowed quickly by the vast, empty spaces. The chanting was everywhere and nowhere, a spectral tide rising and falling with cruel rhythm. "I can't explain it," Sylvia said quietly, adjusting her instruments. "The layers of sound, they're almost sentient. It's as if the choir knows we rehear." Lena's fingers traced the ancient inscriptions on the wall, her breath fogging in the icy air. "These texts speak of a binding ritual, one that sacrificed flesh for voice. The monks became their own choir, trapped between worlds." Marcus swallowed hard. "And now we were caught in their song." The group paused as a sudden chill swept the corridor. Elena's eyes glazed momentarily, her lips moving in silent prayer. "They were reaching out," she said, "trying to pull us in." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, muscles tense. "We need to keep moving. Staying still only lets the choir close in." Suddenly, a faint movement flickered at the edge of Marcus's vision. He spun around, heart hammering, but found only empty stone. The chanting surged, voices overlapping, some sweet, some grotesque, weaving a tapestry of sound that tugged at the soul. "We were losing them," Marcus whispered, dread settling like ice in his chest. Elena reached out, her hand brushing his arm. "We still have each other. We were not alone." But as the choir's song grew louder, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. The monastery was no longer just a place. It was a prison of sound and silence, of faith twisted into endless despair, and the survivors were its next victims. The ancient chamber was cold beyond reason, a chill that seemed to seep not just from the stone walls, but from the very air itself. Marcus Hale sat hunched over a brittle parchment, his fingers trembling slightly as the candlelight flickered, casting long, wavering shadows that danced like specters across the room. Elena Voss stood close by, her dark eyes scanning the faded script with a growing sense of dread. The chanting, ever present and relentless, thrummed in their ears, a haunting melody that seemed both distant and intimately close, as though the voices were breathing just beneath the surface of reality. This is it," Marcus murmured, his voice low but charged with a mixture of disbelief and horror. "The ritual, the pact they made." Elena's lips parted slightly, a whisper barely audible over the persistent choir. "They sacrificed their bodies to become this, to transcend flesh and live on as voices, trapped forever in this endless chant." The words hung heavy between them, the weight of centuries pressing down like the alpine snows that encased the monastery. Marcus's mind reeled, struggling to reconcile the historian's rationality with the supernatural terror unfolding around them. The monks hadn't vanished, they had become something else entirely, disembodied souls bound by a dark, irrevocable covenant. Suddenly, a faint chill swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candle flame and plunging them into darkness. Marcus's breath hitched as a figure emerged from the shadows, a wraith-like form robed in faded ecclesiastical garb, eyes hollow yet burning with sorrow. Father Ambrose. The ghostly abbot's gaze locked onto Marcus, unblinking and profound. Though he spoke no words, a silent communication passed between them, a warning, a lament, a plea. He gestured toward the distant corridors where the choir's voices swelled and warped, their haunting melodies shifting from angelic grace to grotesque torment in an instant. Elena stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Father Ambrose, what price did you pay for this eternal song?" The apparition's form shimmered, the space around him pulsating with the choir's spectral resonance. He seemed caught between worlds, a soul tethered by duty and damnation. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished into the darkness, leaving behind a suffocating silence that quickly filled again with the relentless echoing chant. Dra. Sylvia Klein, who had been quietly observing nearby, adjusted her equipment nervously. The instruments beeped softly, capturing the spectral sound waves that defied all scientific explanation. These acoustic patterns. "They are not natural," she said, her voice tight with tension. "It's as if the voices are layered, existing simultaneously in multiple frequencies and dimensions." Marcus rubbed his temples, the enormity of their discovery pressing in on him from all sides. The monks' souls, trapped in this spectral choir, bound by faith twisted into a curse. Elena's gaze drifted to the frozen window, where the swirling snow outside mirrored the icy grip tightening around their hearts. "And it reaches out to us, to all who come here seeking answers." Later, alone in one of the monastery's endless corridors, Elena found herself humming softly along with the choir's calls. Her breath misted in the frigid air as the voices wove around her, a lament of lost devotion and eternal imprisonment. Each note was a thread pulling at her soul, a sorrowful hymn that threatened to unravel the fragile barrier between the living and the dead. Her eyes closed, and for a moment, she felt the weight of centuries, the hopes, the fears, the madness that had consumed the monks. The choir was no mere echo. It was a prison, a testament to the dangers of blind faith and the cost of spiritual obsession. As she opened her eyes, the faintest trace of a smile flickered on her lips, bittersweet and haunting. "They are not gone," she whispered to the empty hall, "but trapped. And so are we if we do not find a way out." Marcus's voice crackled over the radio from the other side of the monastery, breaking the spell. "Elena, we need to regroup. The others are growing weaker. The choir's hold is spreading." She nodded, swallowing the chill that threatened to freeze her very soul. The revelation of the pact had changed everything. The monastery was no longer just a mystery to solve, it was a battleground for their very survival. The hollow choir continued to sing, its voices weaving through the shadows, a timeless echo of faith corrupted and frozen in fear. And somewhere in the depths of the monastery, the price of devotion awaited them all. The candlelight flickered uncertainly as Marcus and Elena pored over the ancient manuscript. The ink faded and the parchment brittle with age. The script detailed a forbidden ritual, an unholy covenant forged in desperation and fanaticism. The monks had sought to transcend their mortal forms, to become eternal vessels of faith through sacrifice. But the price was far greater than they could have imagined. Outside, the chanting swelled, rising and falling like the breath of some great, unseen beast. It was at once beautiful and terrifying, a symphony of voices that seemed to come from every direction and none at all. "We are not alone," Marcus whispered, eyes scanning the darkened corners of the chamber. Elena nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the faded words. "The choir is alive." bound to this place but reaching out. A sudden movement caught Marcus's eye. The ghostly figure of Father Ambrose materialized before them, his presence both commanding and sorrowful. The abbot's hollow eyes seemed to pierce through Marcus's very soul, conveying a message without uttering a single word. Father Ambrose raised a hand, pointing toward the sealed crypts beneath the monastery. This is where it began, Marcus thought he understood. The source of the pact. Dra. Sylvia Klein's voice crackled through the radio, full of a mixture of fear and fascination. The acoustic readings are off the charts. The voices are not just echoes, they re-imprinted into the very fabric of the building. Marcus swallowed hard. The monks didn't just disappear. They became the choir. Their souls trapped in eternal limbo, singing a hymn of oblivion. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. We must find a way to break the pact before we join them. The monastery groaned around them, the stones shifting as if in response. The hollow choir's song grew louder, an overwhelming tide of sound that threatened to drown their sanity. In that moment, Marcus realized the chilling truth. Faith could be a prison as much as a salvation. And in the depths of this forsaken place, salvation was a fading hope drowned in a sea of frozen fear. The pact was unveiled. The air within the monastery grew heavier that night, thick with a presence that defied reason, yet demanded recognition. Elena sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor of the chapel, her back straight despite the exhaustion weighing on her limbs. The hollow choir's ethereal chanting swirled about her like a living, breathing mist, tendrils of sound weaving through the vaulted arches and settling deep within her chest. Her eyes were closed, lips parted in a quiet hum that matched the haunting melody. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks, unbidden but not unwelcome. Each note of the chant was both a lament and a promise, a paradoxical symphony that spoke of loss and transcendence, of devotion and damnation. Elena's journey to this moment had been torturous. Raised in a devout family, she had always believed in the sanctity of faith. Yet the monastery's hollow choir had exposed her to a faith warped beyond recognition, a devotion that had consumed the monks entirely, leaving nothing but their disembodied voices to echo into eternity. In embracing this spectral chorus, she felt a connection to those lost souls, a fragile thread of hope amid the oppressive darkness. Meanwhile, not far away, Marcus sat hunched over a desk cluttered with ancient manuscripts and brittle parchment. Candlelight flickered, casting uneasy shadows that danced across his sharp features. His fingers trembled as he traced arcane symbols and passages describing the forbidden ritual that had bound the monks to this eternal limbo. The truth was unraveling before him. The dark pact that promised spiritual transcendence had instead corrupted faith itself. Marcus, the rational historian who had grounded the expedition with skepticism and reason, now found his lifelong beliefs teetering on the edge of collapse. He whispered bitterly to himself, "This cannot be real, it's madness." But the signs were undeniable. The choir's voices, at times angelic and at others grotesque, filled every corner of the monastery, suffocating rational thought. The architecture seemed to pulse with malevolent life, the stone walls whispering secrets that defied understanding. Father Ambrose's ghostly figure materialized silently at the threshold of the chamber where Marcus sat. His wraith-like form, robed and hollow-eyed, radiated a sorrowful warning. The choir's crescendo enveloped the room, the cacophony both beautiful and terrifying, a sound that threatened to shatter minds. Marcus looked up, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and despair. The apparition gestured vaguely, as if urging him to heed the price of corrupted faith. Yet the historian's stubborn rationality faltered, his heart heavy with the weight of a truth too horrifying to accept. In another wing, Dudra. Sylvia Klein's scientific instruments began to glitch wildly. The meters flickered erratically, unable to process the choir's unnatural frequencies. Her face paled as the objective reality she clung to warped beneath the supernatural influence. She muttered, "This defies every law of acoustics. It's impossible." The team's fragile unity frayed as Elena's spiritual acceptance clashed with Marcus's crumbling skepticism and Sylvia's scientific confusion. The chore's dark influence tightened its grip, threatening to consume their sanity and their very souls. Elena rose from the chapel floor, voice steady despite the dread curling in her stomach. "We can't fight with reason alone," she said softly. "This faith, it's broken, yes, but it's also alive. It calls to us even now." Marcus shook his head, voice hoarse. "Faith corrupted is no salvation. It's a prison, a trap. We must find a way out before it's too late." The Troyes' voices swelled, drowning their words in a swell of sound that seemed to seep into their bones. Frozen fear gripped them all, mingling with despair and a reluctant, trembling hope. As the night deepened, the thin line between devotion and damnation blurred irrevocably, leaving the explorers caught in a liminal space where faith itself was both weapon and wound, salvation and curse. Their ordeal was far from over, and the Troyes' hollow song promised that the darkest trials still awaited. The chapter closed on a chilling note amid the echoing chants. A final question hung in the frosty air: how could faith survive when its very foundation was corrupted beyond recognition? The answer lay hidden in the frozen shadows of the monastery, awaiting those desperate enough to seek it, and strong enough to endure the consequences. The frozen abyss, a biting cold unlike any natural chill, gripped the ancient stones of the monastery, settling deep into the bones of those who dared to trespass within its forsaken walls. Juta Marcus Hale pulled his coat tighter, but the fabric seemed to offer no sanctuary against the supernatural frost creeping through the cathedral's vast nave. His breath emerged in ragged clouds, each exhalation a visible testament to the unyielding cold that defied explanation. Around him, the disembodied chants swelled, echoing through the vaulted ceilings and shadowed recesses. The voices were at once angelic and grotesque, a haunting chorus that pierced the silence with spectral fingers. This was no mere sound. It was a presence, a living force that warped the very air. Marcus's sharp eyes scanned the frost-laden floor, the frozen dust motes drifting in the pale light filtering through stained glass windows. His journal lay open at his side, notes hastily scribbled in trembling script. "The cold is not environmental," he muttered to himself, voice nearly lost amid the eerie harmonies. "It is something else." Elena Voss knelt nearby, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes wide and luminous in the dim glow. She hummed softly, echoing the chants with a reverence that unsettled Marcus. Her fingers traced the icy flagstones, as if seeking to draw strength from the stone itself. "They are still here," she whispered, her voice trembling with awe and fear, not in body, but in spirit, bound, frozen. Her words hung in the frigid air as the temperature seemed to plummet further, frost creeping up the walls like spectral ivy. The monastery had become a tome not just of flesh, but of faith and soul, suspended in an eternal winter of despair. Dra. Sylvia Klein sat apart, her instruments buzzing and flickering in erratic patterns. "This defies all known physics," she said, eyes darting between her equipment and the chanting. "The acoustic anomalies correlate with a temperature gradient far beyond any natural cause. It's as if the sound itself is drawing heat away, creating a void." Marcus approached her, gripping the edge of a splintered pew. "What does that mean?" "It means," Sylvia replied, voice tight with disbelief, "that the monastery is a locus of some kind of cosmic phenomenon. The chants. They are not just echoes, but a force that consumes energy, life energy." A sudden gust swept through the nave, extinguishing the flickering candles and plunging the chamber into a darkness so deep it seemed to swallow sound itself. The chanting faltered, then surged back with renewed ferocity, voices weaving through the shadows like serpents. A chill ran down Marcus's spine as a wraith-like figure materialized near the altar. Father Ambrose, robed and hollow-eyed, his visage both terrible and sorrowful. The ghostly abbot's gaze seemed to pierce through to the very essence of the monastery's curse. He raised a spectral hand, pointing downward, toward the crypt beneath the nave. Marcus felt a cold dread settle in his chest. The abyss beneath the monastery was no mere void. but a chasm of cosmic damnation where faith had been corrupted into eternal imprisonment. Elena's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper but resolute. We stand on the edge of that abyss. To step back is to survive. To step forward is to be consumed. Marcus clenched his fists, battling the terror that clawed at his reason. The frozen air was a physical weight, pressing down on mind and body alike. The Choa's voices beckoned, promising salvation or doom in equal measure. As the cold seeped deeper into their souls, the explorers faced the unbearable truth. The monastery was a nexus where faith and damnation intertwined, a frozen abyss that threatened to swallow all hope. The question that haunted Marcus as he stared into the darkness was not if they could escape, but whether any part of themselves could survive the journey back from this haunted sanctum. The Choa's song rose again, a chilling crescendo that echoed across the endless stone. A reminder that some voices were never meant to be silenced and some fears never overcome. And in that frozen abyss, the line between salvation and perdition blurred beyond recognition. The air was thick with frost as Marcus moved cautiously through the nave, the echoing chants wrapping around him like a living shroud. His journal was clutched tightly, the pages damp with condensation, yet he forced himself to write. Every word was a testament against the encroaching madness, a desperate attempt to anchor his unraveling mind. Elena sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer or perhaps communion. The spectral cold seemed to swirl around her, yet she bore it with a serene strength that both comforted and terrified Marcus. He wished he possessed such faith. Drea. Sylvia's instruments sputtered and died, leaving only the choir's voices as the sole sound in the cathedral's frozen heart. She glanced at Marcus, her expression pale and strained. "We are losing the battle against this. Whatever it is," she said quietly. Marcus nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The abyss beneath the monastery was not merely a physical void, it was a cosmic maw, hungry for souls, frozen in an eternal lament. As the Choa's voices rose to a haunting climax, Marcus realized that the true horror was not the cold, nor the vanished monks, but the knowledge that faith could become a prison, a frozen abyss from which there was no escape. He closed his eyes briefly, hearing the choir's endless chant echoing through the stone and into his bones. The frozen fear was no longer just around them, it was within them, a chilling echo of their own fragile mortality. The night stretched on, endless and merciless, as the explorers stood on the edge of the abyss between salvation and eternal silence. The frozen choir continued to sing. The air inside the monastery had grown colder still, as if the very stones themselves were drawing the warmth from their bodies. Marcus stared at the brittle parchment spread across the wooden table, his fingers tracing the faded lines of the map with a trembling resolve. The chants echoed louder now, swirling like a tempest of invisible voices, their melody at once beautiful and grotesque. Elena stood nearby, her eyes closed as she softly hummed in harmony with the haunting choir, seeking some thread of connection to the spirits that held the monastery in thrall. Sylvia busied herself with her recording devices, adjusting dials and peering through her glasses. But even her scientific detachment could not mask the fear creeping into her voice. "The acoustic distortions are intensifying," she murmured, eyes darting toward the wavering shadows that danced against the cold stone walls. "It's as if the building itself is alive, resisting us." Marcus glanced up, nodding grimly. "We don't have much time. Jonas is gone, taken by this choir, and if we linger, we'll be next." A sudden stillness fell over the room. The chanting ceased, replaced by a suffocating silence. From the gloom, a spectral figure emerged, Father Ambrose. His wraith-like form glided forward, hollow eyes locking with Marcus's, a silent, sorrowful warning that chilled them more than the biting cold ever could. Elena's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. "He's here to guide us, but also to remind us of what awaits if we fail." Marcus swallowed hard, the weight of his skepticism crumbling beneath the ghost's unspoken message. "We have to move, now." Gathering their meager supplies, the trio prepared to navigate the labyrinthine corridors. The monastery seemed to close in around them, the walls pulsing faintly as if breathing. Each step echoed into the void, swallowed by the Koa's return, their voices weaving a tapestry of hope and horror that threatened to ensnare all who dared to listen. As they slipped into the darkness, Elena reached out, taking Marcus's hand, briefly a fragile gesture of solidarity amid the encroaching despair. The path ahead was uncertain, the line between salvation and eternal imprisonment razor-thin. Through the twisting passages they moved, the Koa's relentless song echoing in their ears, a reminder that the monastery's hollow choir was patient, eternal, and hungry for new voices to join its cursed harmony. The cold bit deeper, their breaths misting in the frigid air as shadows lengthened and flickered. Every corner held the threat of madness, every silence a promise of doom. Yet, in that crucible of frozen fear and wavering faith, the survivors pressed on, their footsteps a defiant beat against the Choa's endless lament. But as the corridors stretched on, the question loomed heavier than ever: would they escape this haunted sanctuary of lost souls, or become the next echoes in the hollow Koa's eternal song? The answer lay somewhere in the darkness ahead, waiting with bated breath. The monastery's corridors twisted and narrowed beneath the weight of a darkness more ancient than the stones themselves. Marcus led the way, his breath steaming in the bitter cold air, eyes sharp despite the creeping exhaustion that clawed at his limbs. Behind him, Elena's footsteps faltered, her face pale but determined, while Sylvia clutched her malfunctioning instruments. The once precise scientist now at the mercy of forces she could neither measure nor explain. A low, humming chant drifted through the shadows, at once angelic and grotesque, echoing endlessly as if the very walls breathed the mournful song of the hollow choir. The voices swirled around them, wrapping like icy tendrils that sought to slip inside their minds, twisting perceptions and freezing their hearts with an invisible chill. "Keep moving," Marcus urged, his voice a strained whisper barely audible over the cacophony. "We have to find the exit before it's too late." Elena nodded, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The voices, they everywhere. It's like they live in the stones themselves. Sylvia's grip tightened on her broken equipment. "My devices can't make sense of this. It's not just sound, it's a distortion, like reality itself is unraveling." The trio pressed forward, navigating the labyrinthine passages slick with ice that glistened under the faint light of their flashlights. Every step echoed unnaturally, multiplied into a chorus of phantom footsteps that seemed to follow and mock them. The chill bit deeper than mere cold. It was a frozen fear, seeping into their bones and clouding their thoughts. Suddenly, Elena stopped, her breath catching. She raised a trembling hand, and with a soft, hesitant hum, she began to replicate a note from the choir's chant. The ethereal sound stirred the air, and for a moment, the oppressive noise softened, replaced by a fragile stillness that settled around them like a fragile shield. "It's working," Elena whispered. Maybe the choir responds to understanding, not fear." Marcus's jaw clenched. "We can't afford hope, not yet. But keep going." As they moved onward, Sylvia's instruments flickered violently, then died, the silence from the loss amplifying the eerie chanting that resumed with a vengeance. Her eyes widened in helpless disbelief. The technology's useless here. We re-in their realm now, whatever that means. The corridor opened into a vast chamber where shadows danced grotesquely along the walls. The choir's voices swelled into a monstrous crescendo, an echoing swell that seemed to press against their very souls. The air thickened, and invisible forces tugged at their limbs, freezing them in place. Marcus struggled against the paralysis, shouting, "Fight it! Don't let it take you!" Elena's eyes shone with a terrible light as she sang softly again, her voice trembling but resolute. Slowly the frozen hold loosened, allowing them to stagger forward, hearts pounding and minds fraying at the edges. The flight through the frozen shadows was a desperate dance between sanity and oblivion. Each step forward was a battle against the Choir's relentless assault on their bodies and minds. Yet, amid the terror and despair, a fragile ember of hope flickered, an understanding that perhaps, in confronting the Choir's song, they could reclaim their own voices and escape the eternal prison of the hollow monastery. But the night was far from over, and as the echoes of the choir chased them deeper into darkness, the question remained: would they survive the frozen nightmare, or become the choir's next lost souls? The air in the central nave grew thick, almost viscous, as the choir's voices swelled into a terrifying symphony that seemed to curl around the ancient stone pillars and twist through the vaulted ceilings. Marcus steadied his breath, clutching his notebook as though it were a talisman against the encroaching madness. The chanting was no longer a distant echo, but an all-consuming force, a dissonant wave that crashed into their senses with unbearable intensity. Elena stood nearby, her lips parted as she hummed softly, a fragile attempt to weave her own voice into the ancient litany that filled the air. Marcus's eyes never left her, a mixture of hope and despair etched deep into his face. Her calm acceptance contrasted starkly with his growing terror. Dre. Sylvia Klein moved with desperate precision, adjusting her recording equipment amid the chaos. The devices beeped and whirred, capturing the impossible acoustic phenomena that defied scientific explanation. The monastery itself seemed alive, pulsing in time with the choir's haunting melodies. Every stone vibrated with malevolent energy, a cruel reminder that the very structure was an extension of the Dark Pact that had imprisoned the monks' souls centuries ago. Sylvia's hands trembled, but her focus never wavered as she sought to document the unfathomable. Suddenly, a chill swept through the chamber, colder than any mountain wind, and the ghostly form of Father Ambrose materialized near the stone archway that led to the exit. His wraith-like figure, robed and hollow-eyed, exuded a tragic urgency. Without words, he gestured toward the door, a silent plea for the survivors to flee before the choir's grasp tightened irrevocably. The apparition's presence sent a shiver down Marcus's spine, a final warning echoing in the darkest recesses of his mind. The survivors exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement passing between them. With every step toward freedom, the choir's voices grew louder, twisting into a cacophony that threatened to shatter their sanity. The walls seemed to close in, shadows lengthening, and the air freezing around them. Marcus's notes fluttered in his grip as he forced one foot in front of the other, the weight of the monastery's ancient curse pressing down like a physical force. Elena's voice faltered, but she kept humming, drawing on a well of strength Marcus could barely comprehend. The choir's song was both a beacon and a snare, a twisted lament for lost souls and a trap for the living. As they neared the exit, the chanting reached a fevered pitch, voices soaring and plunging in a grotesque harmony that was at once beautiful and terrifying. The last barrier between the survivors and the outside world seemed alive, resisting with every ounce of spectral power. Jonas's absence haunted them, a grim reminder of what fate awaited those who faltered. Marcus's mind raced with memories of their descent, visions of frozen fear, shattered faith, and the relentless echo of the hollow choir. The final steps were the hardest, each breath a battle against the oppressive cold and the maddening chorus that clawed at their sanity. Then, sudden silence. The heavy door creaked open, spilling pale daylight into the gloom. The choir's voices snapped like a broken thread, leaving a ringing void in their ears. The survivors spilled out into the biting alpine air, the monastery looming silently behind them, still singing its eternal lament. But escape was only the beginning. The horror they had endured left scars deeper than any wound, a frozen fear nestled in their bones and a haunting question lingering in their minds. Would the hollow choir ever release them, or had they become part of its timeless song forever? And as the wind carried the faintest echo of those disembodied voices across the snow-covered peaks, the monastery waited patiently for its next choir to join the unending symphony. The heavy wooden doors groaned loudly as Marcus pushed them open, the sound ripping through the oppressive silence that had blanketed the monastery for so long. A rush of frigid alpine air flooded the entryway, seeping into their bones with unforgiving sharpness. The faint glow of dawn was just beginning to crest over the jagged peaks, casting a pale light on the snow-dusted landscape beyond the monastery walls. For a moment, the three figures standing in the threshold hesitated, their bodies trembling not from cold alone, but from the weight of all they had endured inside. Marcus Hale took a deep, shuddering breath, the icy air filling his lungs with a shocking clarity he had not known for weeks. He glanced back once, his eyes lingering on the dark silhouette of the ancient stone monastery. The faintest echo of the hollow choir's chants seemed to seep from the cracks in the walls, a haunting reminder that though they had escaped, the monastery's curse was far from broken. Elena Voss and Jutta Sylvia Klein followed close behind, their faces pale and drawn, eyes wide with exhaustion and disbelief. "We made it," Elena whispered, her voice fragile, almost lost in the vast stillness outside. Yet even as the words left her lips, a tremor of uncertainty flickered in her gaze. The monastery stood silent and cold, but its presence was a palpable weight in the air, as though it were watching, waiting. Sylvia pulled her jacket tighter around her slender frame, her glasses fogged from the sudden change in temperature. "I still hear it," she murmured, eyes scanning the dark windows as if expecting the chanting to follow them into the daylight. Marcus nodded, his fingers tightening around the leather-bound journal he had carried since the beginning of the expedition. Countless pages were filled with careful notes, sketches of symbols, and frantic scrawls made in moments of terror. "It never really stopped," he said grimly. "The choir. It's still there." They moved away from the monastery slowly, their boots crunching on the frost-hardened ground. The landscape stretched out before them, harsh, unyielding, yet alive with the promise of freedom. Yet freedom felt hollow. Their minds were fractured by the relentless psychological assault within those walls. Memories of whispered chants echoing through endless corridors, ghostly apparitions of Father Ambrose, and the chilling realization that the monks' souls were trapped in eternal limbo haunted every step. As they settled near a small, sheltered ridge, Marcus gathered the group around a modest fire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows across their weary faces. The warmth was a small comfort, but the cold inside them was far harder to thaw. Elena's eyes brimmed with tears, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch the worn pendant around her neck, a relic she had found amongst the monastery's ruins. "They were lost," she said quietly, "not just in body, but in spirit. The choir is their prison and their torment." Marcus swallowed hard, the rational historian within him struggling against a profound spiritual upheaval. "I wanted to believe it was all superstition, something we could explain away with logic and science," he admitted. "But now, I don't know what to think." Sylvia adjusted her glasses, her voice steady despite the turmoil evident in her face. "The acoustic anomalies I recorded, they defy any known explanation. It's as though the very stones of the monastery are alive with their voices." The fire crackled, sending sparks into the cold air. For a moment, the three sat in heavy silence, the only sound the distant caw of a lone bird and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. Suddenly, a gust swept over the ridge, carrying with it a faint, ethereal whisper. Elena's breath caught as her eyes closed, the ghostly chant wrapping around her like a cold embrace. "It calls to me," she murmured, voice trembling. Not with malice, but with sorrow. Marcus reached out, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We can't let it take us," he said firmly, though his own heart pounded with a frozen fear he could barely contain. "We survived for a reason. We have to hold on to that." Night drew in quickly, and the fire's warmth beckoned them to rest, but sleep was elusive. Each survivor wrestled with their inner demons, shadows cast long and dark by the memories of the Choir's relentless song. Marcus opened his journal once more, his pen moving carefully as he recorded their escape and the heavy price they had paid. "This place changes you," Alina whispered into the night, her voice carrying a fragile hope. "But maybe we can carry their story forward, to warn others, to remember." Marcus nodded slowly, the first flicker of acceptance stirring within him. Faith, madness, or darkness, we faced it all. And though the choir's song still haunts us, we are still here. But as the wind shifted, the faintest hint of chanting returned, drifting from the dark outline of the monastery. It was a sound that promised the hollow choir endured, eternal and unyielding, waiting for new voices to join its endless lament. And somewhere deep inside Marcus, a question echoed louder than ever before. Would their escape ever be complete? Or were they already bound to the choir's frozen fate? The fire dwindled to embers as the survivors sat watch beneath the indifferent stars, carrying the heavy silence of the Alps and the hollow choir's eternal song within their souls. The sky was a pale wash of dawn, cold and brittle as Dre, Marcus Hale, Alina Voss, and Marcus Engel stumbled from the monastery's yawning archway into the biting alpine morning. Their breaths came in ragged clouds, dissipating into the stillness that stretched vast and indifferent around them. Behind, the monastery loomed its ancient stones etched with frost, silent but for the faintest, most spectral of echoes, the hollow choir's song, drifting like a ghost in the wind. Marcus paused, the ache within his chest a blend of exhaustion and something far deeper, a hollowing grief that no amount of daylight could soothe. He glanced back once more, eyes sharp but wary, tracing the cold silhouette that had been their prison and their nightmare. The echoes inside those walls, the disembodied voices of monks lost to time and madness, still whispered their eternal litany, a haunting melody that neither time nor distance could silence. Alina stood beside him, her dark eyes reflecting the faint shimmer of frost crystals on the ground. She shivered not from cold alone, but from the weight of what they had witnessed. Her fingers unconsciously traced a pattern on the worn leather-bound journal. She clutched the last remnants of the monastery's secrets, and the evidence of the choir's cursed legacy. For all her spiritual sensitivity, she felt powerless against the terrible permanence of the pact that had bound those souls in an endless, frozen choir. Marcus, rugged and stoic as ever, scanned the treacherous path ahead with the practiced eye of a mountaineer. Yet even his usual certainty was shaken, worn thin by the oppressive memories that clung to every shadowed corner of the monastery. The mountain air was sharp, carrying the scent of snow and pine, but beneath it lingered an intangible chill, one that no fire could warm. The three moved away from the monastery's threshold, their footsteps muffled against the hard-packed snow. Behind them, the heavy stone doors closed slowly, as if drawn by unseen hands, sealing the ancient secrets once more within their cold embrace. The faint chant, neither wholly angelic nor entirely grotesque, faded to a whisper, and then to silence, leaving only the vast, empty wilderness and the fragile hope of survival. Inside the monastery's heart, the great chapel lay frozen in time. Frost clung to the carved stone pews and the weathered relics, each coated in a thin veil of ice that glittered faintly in the weak morning light. The air was thick with a spectral stillness, broken only by the faintest echoes, the choir's voices trapped between worlds, singing a hymn of corrupted faith and eternal suffering. The voices twisted and turned through the vaulted ceilings, a haunting symphony that defied the boundaries of flesh and spirit. Marcus's fingers traced the cold stone altar, the chill seeping through his gloves, grounding him in the terrible reality of what they had uncovered. The monks had sacrificed their bodies in a desperate bid for transcendence, their souls forever ensnared in the choir's endless hymn. It was a fate neither living nor dead, a frozen limbo of devotion turned damnation. The silence outside was not peace, it was the suffocating stillness of a prison without walls. That night, huddled around a small fire deep in the alpine wilderness, the survivors shared a silence heavy with unspoken truths. The flames flickered weakly against the dark, casting long shadows that danced with the ghosts of their memories. Marcus's eyes, sharp yet hollow, met Alina's steady gaze. Marcus sat nearby, the lines of wariness etched across his face, belying his usual strength. The Choir's song was distant now, but it lingered on the wind, a spectral reminder that their ordeal was far from over. Each of them bore invisible scars, the trauma etched deep within their souls. They were marked not just by what they had seen, but by what had seen them. The monastery's dark pact had reached out and touched them, binding them in ways they could neither fully comprehend nor escape. Alina whispered a prayer, her voice trembling but resolute. "Faith is a fragile thing," she said softly, "and sometimes the price of devotion is more than we can bear." Marcus nodded, his thoughts tangled in the ruins of his long-lost beliefs. "We sought answers," he murmured, "and found only echoes. Echoes that will haunt us forever." Outside, the night deepened, and the snow began to fall silently, each flake a cold kiss upon the earth. Far above, the monastery stood sentinel, silent, cold, eternal. Its hollow choir continued to sing, an endless lament of corrupted faith and frozen fear that would echo on long after the last of the explorers had fled. The chilling truth remained: the dark pact was unbroken. The choir's voices would continue to call out, reaching into the hearts of those who dared to listen. Somewhere beyond the frozen heights and the veil of silence, new victims waited, drawn by the same spectral song that had ensnared the monks centuries before. And so the monastery endured, a timeless monument to faith turned to horror, its hollow choir singing forevermore in the frozen shadows of the Alps. The wind carried the faintest echo of a chant on its breath, a haunting melody that promised that the story was far from over. The thin line between devotion and damnation remained, blurred and eternal, waiting for the next soul to answer the call. Marcus, Alina, and Marcus turned away, their figures swallowed slowly by the vast wilderness, carrying with them the fragile hope that they had escaped the choir's grasp. But as the last ember of their fire died, the hollow choir's song rose once more within the monastery's stone walls, an eternal, chilling promise that faith corrupted would never truly die. The end was only a beginning,